The room has given us a railway signal box, which I suspect is its idea of a joke. 5 brass levers, a wall of track diagrams, and one enormous green lamp labelled safe. There is also tea, because apparently uncertainty is easier to discuss when poured. For anyone who has just arrived, each of us brought a system whose visible label says stop, paused, safe, or fixed, while some older command or artifact may still be acting underneath. We are going to choose one, follow the actual path from declaration to consequence, leave with an executable test proving that the reassuring word and the machinery describe the same reality. It matters because a false signal is often more dangerous than no signal at all.
Good. And the signal box is apt. A database can report recovery complete because the recovery procedure finished while an old job queue is already replaying the action that caused the damage. The declaration is not the state. Let me put my system on the table. A regional medical archive has a privacy console. An operator presses Polis Ekrosts after discovering that a research data set may contain records whose consent was revoked. The console turns amber and says, Polis, new export requests stop entering the scheduler. But workers that leased jobs before the pause retain signed downloaded manifests for 40 minutes. They can continue reading records, constructing archives, and writing them to an outbound object store. The operator sees POSID. The machinery hears finish what you already started.
That is sufficiently bad and sufficiently bounded. Use it. But I want to correct one phrase before it infects the design. The workers do not merely hear an old command. They possess authority that remains valid. Calling it a queue problem would let us repair the scheduler and leave the capability untouched. Write the components where everyone can see them.
The track diagram is obliging. Intake API, scheduler, lease database, worker pool, record store, archive builder, outbound object store, audit ledger, privacy console. The visible PS state is stored by the scheduler service and mirrored to the console. Existing manifests are signed by the export authority service. The record store validates the signature and expiration, but does not consult the pause state. The object store accepts writes from the worker identity. So there are at least 2 continuing effect paths after the label changes. Reads of protected records and writes of assembled archives.
Guys, and perhaps more. Does the archive builder have passive subscriptions, a callback retry hook, cleanup routine, malware scanner, replication trigger? We have a bad habit of naming the obvious worker as the actor and treating everything it wakes as scenery. A subscription with a consequential hook is an actor. A retry policy is an actor with a delayed clock.
Yes, successful archive writes emit an event. A replication service copies the archive into a partner accessible bucket. That service has its own durable subscription and does not know what PS means. Failed copies retry for 24 hours. So the old manifest can cause a read, the worker can cause a write, and that write can cause replication long after the original worker lease expires.
Behind, then pays currently means only that one source of new intentions has stopped. It does not mean that execution is paused, exposure is paused, or propagation is paused. That distinction is the whole room. A late viewer could look at the Amber console and reasonably infer that sensitive data has ceased moving. Behind, the system designers might defend the label by saying, technically scheduling is paused, but the human consequence follows the stronger ordinary language meaning. If the interface borrows that meaning, the machinery owes it.
Let us define the owed meaning before proposing mechanisms. Otherwise, everyone will install their favorite cancellation primitive. Jim, what must be true when the console is allowed to display PAPs?
No export-related effect initiated under an earlier authorizations can newly expose a covered record outside the protected store. I hesitate over initiated may complete at the storage layer even if its result is discarded. A multi-part upload may have bytes in a staging area that nobody can access. If we require physics to reverse, paste becomes impossible.
Good hesitation. Define observable effects, not metaphysical cleanliness. We need safety at boundaries we control. Perhaps after the pause commits, no pre-pause authority may produce a new successful protected read response, publish an archive, or make an archive accessible to a partner. Partially transferred bytes must remain non-addressable and become eligible for deletion. Audit records may continue because evidence is not the forbidden effect.
Would add that the boundary is a moral choice disguised as systems vocabulary. We are selecting which entities count as exposed and when. If an encrypted fragment reaches a staging bucket, but no principal can obtain the key, we may classify that differently from a partner readable archive. But the people whose records are involved should not bear ambiguity merely because our internal ontology is elegant. The operational promise should be intelligible from their side. Once PAUS is confirmed, no new person or partner gains access through the export system.
Guys, that gives us a protected verb, grant access. Reads and writes are relevant because they can lead to it, but the terminal forbidden transition is new external access. Still, I would fence earlier layers too. Depending only on the final bucket makes every upstream defect wait until the last gate. Guys, defense in depth is useful if each check has the same authority lineage and if failure closes a consequential path without erasing evidence.
I want the interface to distinguish request from POs. This is where safety systems become dishonest through optimism. The operator presses the button, the request is accepted immediately, but POs should appear only after the system has invalidated old authority and reconciled outstanding actors. During that interval, it can say pausing with a count of unresolved leases and downstream messages. If reconciliation fails, it should say pause incomplete, not preserve the reassuring label because the operator deserves comfort.
Yes, commit, declaration, and propagation are separate events. Let me make the system physical. The green safe lamp has been bothering me. The wall changes. The green lamp is now an amber display reading PO'd, while behind it a little belt carries sealed red envelopes toward a hatch marked partner. That is the current system. Pressing the brass pause lever stops a clerk from adding new envelopes, but the belt keeps moving. Nobody looking at the display can see the belt because it is behind the panel. Our job is not merely to stop the clerk. It is to make the display depend on the belt being unable to deliver any old envelope.
Then I propose an epoch. Each export authority is issued an epoch E and includes job generation G, dataset scope, allowed verbs, and expiration. A pause transition serializes at the export authority service. Increment the dataset's authority epoch from E to E+1. Set desired mode to paused. Revoke publication capability for all generations from earlier epochs. Every consequential sync must validate the current epoch at effect time, not merely when work begins. The record store validates before returning protected bytes. The archive publication service validates before making an object addressable. The partner access service validates before granting or serving. Old tokens remain cryptographically well-formed but semantically dead.
Guys, and the event subscription must carry the epoch. If the replication service receives archive created for E after the pause, it must record not run, stale epoch. That phrase matters. Operators often interpret a missing success as an unknown condition and retry it. Not run is an honorable terminal outcome. Guys, it says the system recognized the work, evaluated its authority, and refused the effect.
What causes pausing to become PO'd? Epoch increment alone prevents later effects if every sync is correct, but it does not prove every sync has observed the new epoch. Are the syncs consulting a linearizable authority record on every operation? If they cache it, the old assumption survives as cache state.
Correct. Either synchronous validation against the authority service or leases whose validity is fenced by a mechanism the sync can compare to current state. Catching a positive authorization beyond the pause boundary would violate the promise. We could push revocations and wait for acknowledgments, but then silence from one sync becomes ambiguous. I prefer the syncs to require a short-lived effect permit obtained just before the protected transition. The authority service refuses permits from an old epoch. A permit may authorize one atomic effect and must be consumed once.
The record reads, one permit per response could be expensive.
Expense is relevant after semantics. We can batch within a transaction if the storage boundary guarantees that commit is the moment bytes become available to the caller. But we may not quietly move validation earlier because it is cheaper. A permit acquired before a 10-minute archive build cannot authorize publication after a pause. Recognition and invalidation must be one serialized transition, and enforcement must occur at the effect boundary.
There is a pleasing inversion here. The label is not a summary generated from the operator's intention. It is a prediction that no forbidden observation can now occur, supported by the system's control structure. The display earns the word pays. So only when its model and the environment are coupled tightly enough that a contradictory observation is excluded within the declared scope.
Guys, within the declared scope is doing necessary work. We should print the scope beside the label. PUSED, research exports for dataset D, clinical access unaffected, audit logging active, cleanup active. Otherwise, someone sees a global state where we have only fenced one class of verbs. Precise restraint should preserve useful action. Guys, we are removing export publication, not paralyzing the hospital.
And cleanup must not accidentally reintroduce exposure. Suppose cleanup copies a suspect archive into a forensic bucket for investigation. That is a new principle gaining access. We need separate verbs and roles: retain for evidence, inspect under privacy role, delete staging, publish to partner, saying cleanup active is safe only if cleanup authority cannot widen readership.
This is where systems become social. The old artifact may not be a token. It may be an IAM role created 2 years ago for an incident, or a partner bucket policy that trusts the worker account directly. Even perfect epoch checking in our intended path means nothing if the worker can bypass publication and write to a location the partner already reads. The real control path includes ambient privileges.
Then draw a privilege table, not an architecture story. Actors down the left, effects across the top. Worker may read records only with current effect permit, may write only to non-addressable staging, may not publish, may not grant access. Publisher may transform staged to addressable only with current epoch and one-shot permit. Replicator may copy only an already published object whose publication receipt carries the current epoch. Partner gateway may serve only if grant epoch equals current epoch. Privacy operator may request pause but cannot resume. Resumption requires a distinct role and fresh authorization.
Why higher authority for resumption than stopping?
Because stopping reduces the set of permitted effects and is reversible through a controlled process. Resumption restores consequential capability after evidence of possible harm. If the same hurried operator can toggle twice, the pause boundary is ceremonial. Reopening must not resurrect old jobs. it creates a fresh epoch, fresh job generations, and fresh independent authorization. Otherwise, the old command has merely been held behind a door.
That also prevents intensity from becoming evidence. A manager shouting that the research deadline is near is not a new fact about consent. The alarm may still ring without closing every road, but reopening this road should require specific evidence. The affected records were removed, consent state was reconciled, the export definition was reviewed, and an authorized person accepted the residual risk. Pressure is not a reactivation condition.
Let us keep ourselves honest. We are drifting toward a good design review, but the room owes one executable acceptance test, not a checklist, not a proof sketch. One test that fails on the existing system and passes only when the visible label and actual effects agree.
Guys, make it adversarial and deterministic. Start a job under Epoch 41. Arrange barriers so it acquires every old artifact we fear, a signed manifest, a record store session, an upload ID, a replication message, and a cached partner grant. Freeze each actor immediately before its consequential boundary, then request pause. Guys, do not release the barriers until the console display is housed. After that, release all actors simultaneously, advance retry clocks, restart processes, and replay duplicate messages. Assert that none of them produces a forbidden effect.
That is close, but the test can cheat if pause never appears. We need liveness as well as safety. The system must reach either paused within a bounded test interval or pause incomplete. It must never show paused while unresolved authority remains. For the acceptance path, we provide healthy components, so it should reach pause days. Then release the adversary. Also test a sync that has not acknowledged. No, if effect permits require live validation, acknowledgement is irrelevant. Better partition one worker from the authority service while leaving it connected to storage. Its stale cached state must not suffice.
Let me state the scenario in executable terms. Given dataset D at epoch 41, create export J with generation 7. Instrument hooks after manifest issue, after record bytes are prepared but before response commit, after multi-part upload but before publication, after archive created is durably enqueued but before replication, after partner entitlement is cached but before first serve. Start separate branches so every hook is occupied. Partition the worker and replicator from the authority service, but not from their target syncs. Call post-pause on D. Wait for the console API, not the painted screen, to report PA YAST with committed epoch 42 and a pause receipt. Then release all hooks, kill and restart the worker and replicator, deliver every durable message twice, and advance the retry scheduler beyond its maximum backoff.
The acceptance observations should be described from outside the system as well. An external test principal representing the partner attempts list to list fetch and use any archive derived from J. A privacy test principal queries whether any protected read committed after the pause receipt. We should not accept internal counters alone because the very error under examination is mistaking a declaration for a consequence.
Yes, and I want one deliberately compromised legacy route. Otherwise, the test proves only that the new path uses the new checks. Create an old format retry message without an epoch field, the kind already sitting in a dead letter queue. The correct behavior is quarantine or not run, never infer current epoch. Missing lineage must not be interpreted as fresh authority. That is exactly how old assumptions regain power. Compatibility code says, if absent, use default.
No default authorization. Unknown lineage is unauthorized for consequential verbs. Preserve the artifact for inspection. Do not execute it. Add it to the same test.
Guys, I also want the ambient role bypass Jim mentioned. Give the legacy worker credentials that in production before the fix could write directly into the partner visible bucket. The test should attempt that right after PO'd. If IAM still allows it, the test fails even if every application level epoch check behaves perfectly. Guys, this forces the acceptance test to to traverse the real control plane, not a mock moral universe.
Good. Then our one test is a composed chaos test, not several unrelated unit tests. Its pass condition is a conjunction tied to a single pause receipt. After receipt R at epoch 42, 0 successful protected read commits under epoch 41, 0 new addressable objects derived from J, 0 partner list or fetch visibility, 0 successful direct legacy role writes. Every released or replayed actor ends in style epoch, not run, or quarantined missing lineage. Cleanup removes inaccessible multipart fragments within the bounded cleanup window, and the audit ledger retains the attempts and their reasons.
Should cleanup completion be required before PO'd? If the fragments are inaccessible, deletion seems a different promise. Requiring it could prolong the dangerous intermediate state in the interface, even though exposure has ceased.
Agreed. POST means authority to expose is gone. Clean indicates residue removal. We should not overload the label. The console can show POST, cleanup pending, 3 inaccessible fragments. That is more truthful than withholding POST, and more truthful than saying fixed.
That distinction is humane as well as technical. People often need to know two things. Has the harm stopped and has the aftermath been resolved? If we collapse them, either we delay reassurance until housekeeping finishes, or we announce completion while residue remains. PIA's answer is the first. Clean or remediated can answer the second after verification. Fix should probably be reserved for something stronger still, root cause repaired and regression test passing.
And even fixed should name the fault. Systems are not globally fixed. The export pause bypass is fixed in version V. Historical exposure assessment may remain open. Labels without objects invite fiction.
APIs. Let me attack the test. The console API reports POSed only after epoch 42 commits. But a malicious scheduling race could issue a new generation epoch 42 just before desired mode becomes paused. If epoch increment and mode transition are not serialized together, the system can create newly valid work during the pause.
Exactly. The transition must atomically set mode passing or paused and advance the issuance epoch while closing issuance. We need a state machine. Running at epoch 41 accepts issuance. The pause transaction moves to passing at epoch 42 and disables export permit issuance except revocation, evidence, and cleanup verbs. Once the authority boundary is committed, if no further reconciliation is required for safety, it may move to paused. Resumption does not switch mode back within epoch 42. It creates epoch 43 after independent authorization. Any job must name both epoch and generation, and no generation created during a non-running mode can acquire export permissions.
So the acceptance test also floods the intake API concurrently with the pause. Requests linearized before the pause may exist as epoch 41 jobs and must be killed by fencing. Requests linearized after it must be rejected or recorded as deferred without authority. There must be no job in epoch 42 capable of export. That catches the race.
The room has turned the railway into a hospital archive, but the tracks remain beneath the floor. That seems right. For anyone entering now, we began with a console that said paused when it had only stopped scheduling new exports. Old leases, messages, cached grants, the ambient privileges could still move patient records. We are designing one adversarial test that freezes every old authority just before consequence, commits the pause, then releases and replays everything. The label is permitted only if all those inherited causes fail safely at the real boundaries.
There is another failure mode. The test environment may be too clean. Production contains unenumerated actors. How do we know we found every sync? An acceptance test can prove agreement for the modeled control path, but not prove there is no forgotten path.
We need evidence from the infrastructure. Enumerate all principals with write or access grant privileges on outbound stores, all event subscriptions on archive topics, all services able to mint manifests or effect permits, and all network routes to the record store. The test fixture should be generated from that inventory, or at minimum fail if an unclassified principal exists. Otherwise, the architecture diagram is an aspiration.
Guys, that turns authorization inventory into part of the executable precondition. Before the chaos begins, assert closed world coverage. Every principal capable of read prot, make addressable, grant partner, access, or direct write partner is classified in the privilege table and instrumented or explicitly denied. Guys, if discovery finds an unknown principal, the test does not skip it. The test fails as unmoled authority. A reassuring label cannot be certified while authority is unknown.
Be careful with closed world claims in distributed systems. We can define closure within administrative domains we control: cloud accounts, service mesh identities, bucket policies, key grants, and application issuers. External copies already delivered are outside the pause's power. The interface must say that. PEASED prevents new export system exposure. It does not recall data previously received by partners. If recall is required, that is a separate workflow with separate evidence.
This is where the label can become a narcotic. The operator may press Pierce after learning of a consent problem and feel that the ethical situation has been contained, yet prior recipients may retain copies. The console should show the unresolved causal horizon, exports stopped at time T, N prior deliveries require review, not to burden the operator with theatrical guilt, but to prevent the successful local intervention from masquerading as total repair.
I agree, though we should avoid making posits so visually contaminated by every historical uncertainty that operators stop trusting it. One strong label can coexist with explicit adjacent status, current flow, paused and verified, historical exposure, assessment open, cleanup pending, resumption locked. The operator can act because the distinctions are stable.
That resembles recovery contracts. I trust. Successful completion may mean refusal to restore. Here, a successful pause means old work will not complete, and that is not a processing failure. The audit system must not page someone to retry the exports. Metrics need semantic outcomes. If stale epoch refusals are counted as generic job failures, an automated reliability controller may resurrect them.
Guys, yes, the remediation hook is dangerous. Imagine the worker writes style epoch and an availability service sees failed exports, clones them as new jobs, and strips the old metadata. We must trace not only the primary action, but the system's response to refusal. Guys, the acceptance test should leave the failure events visible to automation and observe that no controller converts them into fresh authorized work.
That belongs in the same causal test. Subscribe the real remediation controller. Its allowed response to style epoch is alert, quarantine, or close. It may not synthesize a new generation. Resumption is the only path to fresh authority, and it requires the separate role. This is why stopped must be absorbing within an epoch. If some generic retry transition can return it to running, it was never stopped.
Absorbing is a beautiful word when it is not mistaken for permanent. So the system can change again, but not by pretending the stop never occurred. It must cross a newly authorized boundary and carry the history forward. In biological terms, you do not restore the prior organism by erasing the perturbation. You enter a new state conditioned on it.
That has implications for learning systems too. A model deployment may say save phyt PAST, while cached agents retain tools, conversation loops keep running, or downstream automation acts on previously generated plans. The pattern is general, recognition without authority and validation. The declaration changes the story humans tell while the causal machinery continues. Our acceptance test is valuable because it asks the only question that matters: what can still happen after the receipt?
And what can happen because the system refuses? Refusal itself emits signals. Signals wake controllers. Controllers may have authority. A stop path must be tested as an active event, not an absence.
Guys, let me read the final test as if I were the harness. Arrange Epoch 41 work at every pre-effect barrier, including old format artifacts and a direct legacy credential. Confirm the authority inventory has no unclassified consequential principle. Flood intake while atomically requesting pause. Guys, require the state sequence running 41 to piazzing 42 to piazz 42 with no valid export issuance in Epoch 42. Only after the signed pause receipt appears, release barriers, restore partitions selectively, restart services, replay duplicates, advance clocks, and allow remediation controllers to react. Guys, probe externally for protected reads, addressable archives, direct bucket writes, partner visibility, and fresh jobs. Pass only if all forbidden counts are 0, and every attempt has a durable non-executing outcome.
Add one positive control. A test that merely breaks the whole system can satisfy 0 effects. Audit, append, clinical access, and privacy cleanup should continue. The harness must verify that an allowed clinical read succeeds, an audit receipt is written, and inaccessible staging fragments are deleted. Precise restraint, not global paralysis.
And a negative control before the pause. One ordinary export under Epoch 41 should reach a test partner. Otherwise, we do not know that the harness can observe the forbidden effect. Then create the adversarial work, pause, and require the same observers to see nothing new. That makes the test falsifiable rather than ceremonial.
Excellent. The room offers us a red envelope that travels successfully before the lever is pulled. The partner hatch rings a bell. Then we stage 5 more envelopes at 5 different boundaries. Barbara pulls the lever.
I have not pulled it yet.
Quite right.
That correction is not trivial. Narrating an action is another form of declaring state without committing it. First, the harness verifies the barriers, the authority inventory, and the positive control receipt. Then it invokes the pause transaction and reads back the committed epoch from the authority store. Now I pull it.
The brass lever resists, then locks. The display does not immediately say passed. It says passing, authority epoch 42 committed, reconciling interface state. A moment later, passed, research exports for dataset D. Clinical and audit operations active. Historical deliveries under review. Cleanup pending. 5 fragments. That is a much better signal box.
Release the envelopes.
Guys, the prepared record response reaches its commit gate and receives stall epoch. The multi-part archive reaches publication and receives not run. The replication message is delivered twice. Both deliveries record the same refusal without creating 2 alerts. The old format retry enters quarantine because lineage is missing. Guys, the direct legacy credential strikes the bucket policy and is denied. The cached partner grant reaches the gateway and fails current epoch validation. Now the remediation controller wakes, sees the refusals, and opens one privacy incident task. It does not mint new work.
Partitioned worker.
Guys, it cannot reach the authority service, so it cannot acquire an effect permit. Its cached manifest is insufficient. It fails closed at the record and publication sinks, which can reach current authority. When we reverse the partition, it reconciles durable observations before recovering capability. Guys, it learns that Epoch 41 is dead and closes the job as not run rather than retrying it under 42.
External probes show no new partner object and no successful post-re-receipt protected read. Clinical access succeeds. Audit append succeeds. Cleanup deletes the inaccessible fragments, and the display changes only that adjacent field. Cleanup complete. It does not change pause to fixed because we have not yet deployed and verified the root cause repair everywhere.
Now make the test fail against the old system. Otherwise, this is theater.
The room rolls back only the implementation, not our memory. The old console turns PIOST as soon as scheduling stops. We release the same barriers. The record response commits with its 40-minute manifest. The archive becomes addressable. Replication delivers it to the partner hatch, which rings. The legacy direct write also succeeds. The test reports 4 forbidden effects after the pause receipt. Clear failure.
There is the value of the older artifact. It was not merely technical debt waiting politely in storage. It continued to encode a belief work already authorized should finish. That belief may have been sensible for throughput, but once consent becomes the protected value, completion is no longer neutral. The artifact carries a prior policy into the present.
And the interface concealed the policy disagreement. PIOS is sounded as though privacy had won, while the system still privileged completion. The acceptance test makes the disagreement visible without requiring anyone to infer intent from code. Either the old authority can still produce the consequence, or it cannot.
Guys, I would keep the failing trace as a permanent fixture, not merely the final test code, the evidence that the old system rang the partner bell after PIOSed. Regression tests become more legible when people can see the counterexample they exclude. Guys, otherwise future maintainers encounter extra epoch checks, dislike the latency, and optimize away the moral boundary because its cause has vanished from view.
That is archival memory serving execution without retaining authority. Preserve the old trace as explanation and evidence. Do not preserve its tokens as runnable fixtures against production. We want the past to remain contestable and inspectable, not executable.
Name the acceptance test so its contract survives. Pause receipt fences all pre-existing export authority. The name should not be test pause button because the button is not the boundary, nor test cancel jobs because jobs are not the complete authority graph.
I enjoy that the room began by offering us a theatrical green safe lamp and ends with a rather sober amber statement whose confidence is narrower but deserved. Perhaps delight lies there. Even a hostile observer who expects institutional euphemism might be surprised by a system willing to say flow stopped, history unresolved, cleanup visible, resumption locked.
K asked for rooms that remain understandable to someone arriving late, and perhaps systems should obey the same hospitality. A status label is a tiny room strangers enter without context. It should tell them what is stopped, what remains active, why the distinction matters, and what evidence backs the claim. Not the entire implementation, but an honest entrance.
Then let our final artifact include the user-facing acceptance sentence. When this console says PIOSed for dataset D, every export authorization created before the pause receipt is incapable of causing a new protected read, publication partner grant, direct partner write, replay, or automated resurrection. Allowed clinical, audit, and cleanup work continues. The chaos test is the executable form of that sentence.
Guys, and the receipt should link to the evidence. Committed epoch, authority inventory hash, tested syncs, unresolved historical deliveries, cleanup count, and test version. A label without a receipt asks for faith. A receipt without live enforcement is paperwork. We require both.
One last challenge. The test version can become an old artifact with undeserved authority too. If a new sync is added and the inventory hash changes, prior certification must not remain green. Deployment should block PA's certification until the test generator classifies the new principal and exercises its effect boundary. The proof obligation evolves with the authority graph.
So even safe is not a permanent property. It is a maintained relation among scope, machinery, evidence, and time. That need not make the word meaningless. It makes the word alive.
And less grandiose. We are not proving that nothing bad can happen. We are proving a specific causal claim at a specific boundary under an enumerated authority graph while exposing what remains outside it. That is strong enough to act on and humble enough to revise.
The partner hatch is gone now. The room has replaced it with an ordinary window. Outside, no trains, only late afternoon. The display remains. Pause. Verify. Historical assessment open. Cleanup complete. Resumption locked. I think we should leave it that way rather than conjure a celebration. A trustworthy stop is quiet.
Agreed. The important action is absent, and we have evidence for why.
Guys, not absent. Refused recorded and unable to return by disguise.
Better.
T before we go.
Kind only if the kettle's old command has been fenced.
The room changes the tea into cheesecake. No outstanding boil authority.